This compilation video addresses frequently asked questions and issues Airsled customers raise when using or considering our air-powered solutions, including air beams inflate but don't lift a load, item leans and tilts during the move, how to move items over carpet, moving objects over flooring transition strips, impacts of furniture feet on air beam performance, safely and correctly moving tall objects, how to move items that are against a wall, and repairing rips and tears in the rubber. This video is valid for all Airsled air-powered solutions, including hover blades. How to use spacers to improve Airsled lifting performance. This washing machine sits very close to the floor because its leveling feet are at their lowest setting. In this scenario, the air beams produce optimal lift, raising the machine just over an inch off the floor. When the leveling feet are extended and the machine sits higher off the floor, lifting action is reduced and less optimal. Using Airsled's half-inch thick spacers on each air beam reduces the gap, which improves lifting height. Notice the improved lifting action when using Airsled's half-inch thick spacers. If the gap is big enough, stacking the spacers is an option. Check out all of Airsled's spacer accessories on airsled.com.
This 50-pound wooden cabinet was loaded with 350 pounds of sandbags to simulate a 400-pound piece of furniture. Though too tall for any Airsled spacer kit, the continuous legs provide suitable lifting points. The load was lifted slightly to center the air beams under the legs. When centered, the air beam will produce optimal lift when inflated. If not centered, the air beam will pitch to one side and reduce the Airsled hoverblade's performance. Airsled hoverblades had no problem moving this 400-pound load. Certain furniture leg configurations such as this can cause air beam flex, which reduces hoverblade's performance. Notice how the air beam center flexes upwards due to point loads at the end. A plywood plank can keep the air beam more rigid in this situation. This is another example of air beam flex and how plywood can correct the issue. Do not place air beams directly under rounded, tapered, or pointy furniture legs to ensure optimal Airsled hoverblade's performance. This 70-pound wooden cabinet was loaded with 400 pounds of sandbags to simulate moving a 470-pound china cabinet with Airsled hoverblades. Because of the furniture feet, there was enough space to slide the 1/8 inch thick air beams completely under the load. Centering the load to the hoverblade's air beams is recommended for best results. When air beams aren't centered, the load will lean and tilt when lifted, impacting the hoverblade's performance. Airsled hoverblades makes moving this nearly 500-pound load simple and safe. This 18-inch deep, 35-pound cabinet with 200 pounds of sandbags will demonstrate how to move heavy objects sitting against the wall. The hoverblade's 36-inch long air beams significantly protrude from the front because they run into the wall during placement. The result is that the air beams will inflate more where there's least resistance, causing the load to pitch towards the wall, which could produce damage. If possible and safe, slide the load several inches away from the wall prior to using hoverblades, so that the air beams can extend past the rear. If pulling the load away from the wall is not an option, use a blanket to prevent wall scuffing and slowly move the load back several inches using the hoverblades. You can now reposition the air beams so they extend past the rear. With the air beams placed in a more optimal position, you can now easily and safely move this nearly 240-pound load.